We met 11 years ago. I was 28, working as a systems analyst for a mid-sized tech company, and she was 25, working in the marketing department at a design firm downtown. It was one of those random encounters that doesn't feel significant at first, but sticks with you in weird ways. I was at a mutual friend's housewarming party, the kind where everyone's crowded in a too-small kitchen holding plastic cups of cheap wine, and she was sitting on the back patio in jeans and a cardigan, talking to someone about books. I remember that part clearly. Books. She was passionate, quick-witted, and had this way of drawing people in without even trying. We ended up talking for hours that night, long after most people had left. I don't even remember who approached who first. What I do remember is walking her to her car and thinking, I hope she's single. Turns out, she was. And even better, she thought I was funny. We went for coffee a week later, which turned into dinner, which turned into weekend hikes and late-night drives and small inside jokes that only we understood. The kind of connection you don't talk about too much, because you're afraid if you say it out loud, you'll jinx it. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. Nothing flashy. Just the two of us on a quiet winter night, a ring, a homemade dinner, and a nervous joke that I barely got through. She said yes with tears in her eyes, and that was it. We were engaged. Now we've been married for 8 years. No kids yet, though we've talked about it. Our life is comfortable, familiar in the best kind of way. We live in a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, nothing extravagant but filled with little pieces of us. Her candles in every room, my endless collection of cables and chargers that I swear I'll organize one day. She has an eye for aesthetics, makes the place feel warm and lived in. I take care of most of the tech stuff and do the grocery runs because I secretly love it. We split chores without ever really talking about it. Just fell into a rhythm over time. Weekdays are predictable. I leave early for work, usually back by 6. She works from home most days, juggling client calls and design mock-ups. We try to cook dinner together when we can. Friday nights are usually movie nights. Saturdays are for errands or seeing friends, and Sundays are sacred, slow mornings, coffee, and long walks if the weather's nice. It's not flashy or dramatic, just a quiet, settled life. If you asked me a year ago how things were going, I would have said great, without even thinking. She's the person I've built my world around. We're that couple that friends say just work. Laura and I have always been what people would probably call a solid couple. There was nothing particularly flashy about us, no whirlwind drama or overly romantic displays that screamed for attention. Instead, we had something steadier. We moved through life like two people who knew exactly what they wanted and, more importantly, wanted it together. Our days were built on routines that became second nature. Quiet mornings with coffee, trading off dinner duties, grocery shopping on Saturdays, and a shared love for ordering too much Chinese food on Sunday nights while watching old movies. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We bought our house about 5 years into the marriage. It's a cozy 2-story in a quiet neighborhood. Not huge, but spacious enough for just the two of us and the life we'd imagined. She had an eye for design from the very beginning, and over the years, the place slowly transformed into something that looked like it was plucked out of a magazine. I'd come home from work some days and find the living room completely rearranged, new curtains hung, a vintage lamp glowing in the corner that wasn't there the day before. I always pretended to roll my eyes, but I secretly loved it. She made the house feel alive, like it was always changing just enough to stay interesting, but never enough to feel unfamiliar. Work-wise, we were both doing fine. I've been with the same company for years, software development and systems management, the kind of job where half your day is in meetings and the other half is fixing things that shouldn't be broken in the first place. It's not thrilling, but it pays well and gives me structure. Laura, on the other hand, has always thrived working for herself. Interior design suited her. She's got this way of visualizing space that most people just don't have. Clients often came back to her for second or third projects, and it was easy to see why. She knew how to listen to people, to really understand their vision even when they couldn't fully articulate it themselves. We'd travel when we could. Europe a few times, the Caribbean once, and road trips whenever we didn't have time for anything too far. She loved beach towns and antique stores, while I leaned more toward hiking trails and breweries tucked away in small mountain towns. We'd compromise, take turns picking the destination, and somehow always ended up enjoying it no matter where we landed. Those trips weren't extravagant, but they gave us memories we still talk about over dinner. Like the time we got lost on a winding country road in Ireland and ended up at a tiny pub where no one could understand our accents, or the night we watched a thunderstorm roll in over Lake Michigan from a cabin porch, wrapped up in blankets with a bottle of wine between us. Weekends were usually reserved for slowing down. She'd sleep in a little later than I did, and I'd take the quiet time to read or tinker in the garage. Once we were both up, we'd fall into our usual groove, breakfast together, maybe some errands or a stop at the farmer's market, then dinner either out or at home, depending on how the week had gone. It was predictable in the best way, like a rhythm we had both learned by heart. Even when the days got busy, we found ways to stay connected. A text here, a shared joke there. She'd send me photos of new project ideas. I'd send her memes or takeout suggestions. Sometimes, I'd catch myself watching her when she wasn't looking, reading on the couch, brushing her hair in the morning, sketching something in her notepad, and I'd feel this quiet certainty settle in my chest. This was it. This was the life we'd built together. Nothing loud or overly complicated. Just two people doing their best to move through the world side by side. One of the things I've always appreciated about our life together is how easily we settled into a sense of comfort without ever letting it feel stagnant. Laura and I have never been the kind of couple who needed constant excitement to feel fulfilled. Instead, we leaned into the quieter parts of life, the daily rituals, the shared silences, the knowledge that someone's there, just in the next room, who knows you better than anyone else ever has. We had our individual spaces, too. I kept a small room upstairs as my home office. It's cluttered, I'll admit that. A couple of old computers I keep meaning to repair, half-read books, cables and jars that I probably should have thrown out years ago. It's a mess, but it's mine. Laura always joked that my organizational system was something only I understood. Her space was the sunroom downstairs, a bright little corner filled with plants, fabric swatches, and design magazines. She'd sit there with her sketchbook, the cat curled up by her feet, her playlist humming through the speaker, usually something soft and instrumental, perfect background noise for her work. Evenings were often spent in the living room. We're both night owls in our own way. I'd be fiddling with some tech project on the coffee table while she read or scrolled through ideas for her next client. Sometimes we wouldn't talk much, just existing together, wrapped in the same quiet. I never saw that as distance. To me, that was intimacy. The kind that didn't need constant words. We entertained occasionally. Mostly small gatherings, dinner with a couple of friends, maybe a holiday get-together with my brother and a few extended family members. Laura had a way of making those nights feel effortless. She'd plan the menu, set the table just right, even light candles and pick a playlist to set the mood. I handled the grill or made cocktails, depending on the crowd. People always commented on how at ease our home felt, how put together we were as a couple. I'd laugh and say it was all her. She always said it was both of us, and maybe she was right. We didn't have kids, and while that had once been a topic of long, emotional conversations, we had eventually reached a place of acceptance. Life didn't unfold the way we'd originally pictured it, but that didn't mean it was any less full. We poured our energy into each other, into our home, into building something solid. Over time, those what-if questions just faded into the background. We stopped needing to explain it to anyone. It just was. Laura's always had this lightness to her, even when things got busy. She finds beauty in small things, in the way light filters through the curtains in the morning, in the scent of a new candle, in finding the perfect throw pillow to match a color scheme she's building. She brings that into everything she does, and honestly, I think being around her has made me notice more, slow down more. I never used to care about those kinds of details, but now I do. Looking back, I don't think there was ever one big moment that defined our relationship. It was a collection of small ones, a shared look across the dinner table, a spontaneous road trip, a quiet hand on my back when I had a stressful day. These are the things that made our life feel real. Not dramatic, not perfect, but real. Ours. Looking back now, I can't say exactly when the feeling started. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It crept in slowly, like a draft under a closed door, something you don't notice at first until you realize it's been chilling the room all along. It started with small things. Laura's routines began to shift, subtly, almost imperceptibly. At first, I chalked it up to her having more client work. She started coming home a bit later than usual. Sometimes, she'd say she was grabbing drinks with a client or stopping by a showroom on the other side of town. Totally believable stuff. She's always been independent, and I never questioned her schedule before. But the pattern changed. She used to text me updates throughout the day, send photos of what she was working on, little things to stay connected. Then, gradually, those messages slowed down. Some days, they stopped completely. I noticed she started guarding her phone a bit more. Not in an obvious way, nothing dramatic. Just little gestures. If I walked into the room, she'd quickly lock the screen or flip it over on the table. If it buzzed, she'd glance at it with this almost unreadable expression, then slide it into her bag. One evening, I asked who she was texting. She smiled and said, "Just a client," and changed the subject. I didn't think much of it at the time, or maybe I didn't want to. We'd always had this open book approach to our relationship. Our phones were never a source of tension. She knew my passcode, I knew hers. Not because we checked each other's messages, but because there was never any need to hide anything. Lately, though, something about the way she held onto her phone made me feel left out. Like I was slowly being moved to the edge of a life I used to be at the center of. She was also distracted. That's the best word I can find for it. We'd be in the middle of a conversation, and I'd see her eyes drift. She'd zone out during dinner, scroll through her phone instead of talking like we used to. One night, I mentioned something about taking a trip in the fall, and she nodded, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. It was like she was somewhere else entirely. I asked her if everything was okay, and she brushed it off. "Just tired," she said. "I've got a lot on my mind lately." I didn't want to push. Maybe she really was overwhelmed. She'd had a few demanding clients that month. And God knows I've had moments where I've brought work stress home with me. But something about this felt different. It wasn't just stress, it felt like distance. A slow, careful pulling away. Still, I tried not to jump to conclusions. We'd been through rough patches before and always found our way back. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe I was overthinking. But there was this weight in my chest that I couldn't shake. This feeling that something was shifting in the foundation of what we'd built. I started paying closer attention. Not because I didn't trust her. I kept telling myself that. But because for the first time in our relationship, I felt unsure. Not about her exactly. More about what I might be missing. I didn't say anything out loud. Not yet. But in the back of my mind, I was starting to wonder, what changed? I've always considered myself a rational guy. I don't jump to conclusions, don't accuse without evidence, and I've never been the jealous type. But in the weeks that followed, I started noticing more things that didn't sit right with me. And no matter how much I tried to reason them away, that uneasy feeling kept tightening its grip on me. Laura's energy had shifted, and it wasn't just in my head. I started keeping track of her schedule, not obsessively, just mentally noting things. She used to come home around 6:30, sometimes earlier. Lately, it was creeping closer to 8. Then there were the missed calls. I tried to reach her around dinner time, and either it would go straight to voicemail, or she'd answer with a distracted tone, like she was somewhere she couldn't really talk. She always had an explanation. Meeting ran long, stopped by the supply store, grabbed dinner with a client. All believable, but it was the tone that got to me. She used to sound excited to hear my voice. Now, half the time, I felt like I was interrupting something. She also started dressing differently. Not drastically, just sharper. A little more done up on days she said she was working from home or running errands. New shoes. A couple of outfits I hadn't seen before. A new perfume she hadn't mentioned. I noticed because she wore it on days when I didn't see her until late. That part stuck with me more than I expected. The strange thing is, I never wanted to become this guy. The one who watches his wife's every move, replaying conversations in his head, analyzing text responses for hidden meaning. I hated the feeling. But when something doesn't feel right in your gut, it's impossible to pretend you don't notice. You start paying attention in a different way, not because you're looking for proof of anything, but because you're hoping to be wrong. You're hoping the facts will line up and make you feel foolish for ever doubting her. One night, I brought up the idea of taking a weekend trip. Nothing big, just the two of us, a quick escape to the coast, something we used to do once or twice a year. She hesitated, said she had a deadline for a client. I offered to work around it, said we could go the following weekend. Then she said something that didn't sit right with me. "I just don't think it's the right time." I didn't argue, but I felt that one. We hadn't taken a trip in over a year. I couldn't remember the last time we'd spent more than an afternoon together without some kind of distraction pulling us apart. Later that night, while she was in the shower, I found myself staring at her phone on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I didn't even lean toward it. But the thought was there, and that was new. That was never who I was before. I'd always believed that trust was built in the spaces where we didn't look over each other's shoulders. And yet, Something had changed. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I was starting to look. Still, I hadn't seen anything conclusive. No messages, no late-night calls, no lipstick stains or shady receipts. Just a growing sense of disconnection, like I was slowly being edged out of a life I thought we were still sharing. I kept trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, to be fair, to be patient, but something inside me had shifted. I couldn't unsee what I was starting to see. It's strange how silence starts to speak louder than words. The absence of things, of affection, of conversation, of effort, becomes its own kind of message. And lately, the silence between Laura and me had grown thick, like a fog we both knew was there but didn't know how to name. I started noticing how much time we were spending apart, not just physically, but emotionally. There were full days where we barely spoke beyond logistical things, groceries, appointments, what time I'd be home. No small talk. No shared laughs. Just the basics. At first, I thought maybe she was just in a funk, like we all get sometimes. Burnout, stress, a bad client. But this felt different. Persistent. Intentional, almost. One night, she told me she was going to a late client consultation on the other side of town. She left around 6, didn't come back until almost 10. When she walked in, she looked tired, but not frazzled. Her makeup was still perfect. Clothes pristine. No laptop, no swatches, no sketches, none of the usual stuff she carried when she'd actually been working. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be accusatory. But I kept noticing these little things that didn't line up. A client meeting that ran late but wasn't on her calendar. An invoice that didn't match the timeline she gave. A new throw pillow she said she bought on a solo shopping trip, except I found the same one in a bag with 2 to-go coffee cups. It was like everything had a shadow behind it. She'd also gotten oddly defensive. One time I asked, casually, if she wanted to grab lunch that Friday since I'd be working near her favorite cafe. She paused, then said she was meeting a client and probably wouldn't have time. The way she said it, it wasn't just dismissive. It was like the idea of me showing up uninvited had made her uncomfortable. That stuck with me. We used to surprise each other all the time. Now it felt like I needed an appointment just to see her face during daylight. My brother Nate came over for a beer one night. We sat in the backyard talking about nothing sports, work, old stories from when we were kids. He asked how things were going with Laura. I hesitated for a second longer than I meant to. Just a second. But he noticed. She's good, I said, maybe too quickly. Just busy. He nodded, but gave me this look, like he knew there was more I wasn't saying. I didn't elaborate. I didn't even want to say it out loud, because once you name something, you make it real. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. But the thoughts had started taking up space. I'd lie awake at night listening to the shower run, wondering where she really was when she said she was out. I'd find myself checking the time, doing mental math on when she left versus when she came back. None of it felt good. None of it made me feel proud. But I couldn't help it. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just confused. Unsure. And, honestly, kind of scared. There was a growing gap between us. Something unspoken but undeniably there. A wall, or a secret, or maybe just a version of her I didn't know how to read anymore. I kept hoping it would pass. That we'd snap out of it, reconnect, get back to that familiar rhythm we used to move in so easily. But every day, that hope felt a little farther away. I think there's a moment, in every relationship that's coming apart, when you stop hoping for reassurance and start searching for proof. I didn't want to get there. I fought it. For weeks, I told myself I was being paranoid. That I was overthinking everything. That if I just gave her space, things would return to normal. But the more I ignored what I was feeling, the more it grew into something I couldn't carry. I wasn't sleeping. Not really. I'd lie in bed next to Laura and listen to her breathing, wondering where she'd been that day, who she had lunch with, what she was thinking when she looked at me and smiled like nothing was wrong. I'd replay our conversations over and over in my head, dissecting her tone, the pauses, the way she avoided eye contact when I asked simple questions. I'd never felt this distant from her, not even during the few rocky phases we'd gone through in the early years. This wasn't a rough patch. This was something else. Something hidden. One night, I was in the kitchen finishing some dishes. I looked out the window and saw her standing on the patio, phone to her ear, pacing slowly. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see her expression, soft, almost amused. She glanced over her shoulder toward the house once, like she was checking to make sure I wasn't watching. Then she turned away again, voice low, hand playing with the hem of her sleeve the way she did when she was nervous. When she came back inside, I asked who she was talking to. She didn't flinch. Just Steph, she said, one of her old clients turned friend. She's going through a breakup. I nodded, but something inside me sank. It wasn't the lie itself. I didn't even know if it was a lie. It was how easily she'd said it, how practiced it sounded. That night, I stood in the dark of the hallway for almost 10 minutes, just watching her as she sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through her phone. The glow lit up her face, and she didn't notice me standing there. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just couldn't shake the feeling that the woman in front of me wasn't the same one I married. Or maybe she was, and I just hadn't seen her clearly in a long time. The next day, I drove to an electronics store during my lunch break and bought 2 discrete cameras. I didn't want to. I hated myself for it. But I needed clarity. I needed to know if I was crazy or if something was really happening behind my back. I waited a few days before installing them, part of me hoping I'd chicken out or she'd say something to make me believe again. But nothing changed. The distance stayed. Her excuses stayed. And I stayed stuck in the worst kind of limbo, the space between denial and truth. So on a Wednesday evening, while Laura was out meeting a client, I set up both cameras. One in the hallway near our bedroom, the other hidden in a bookshelf across from our bed. They were motion-activated, recording only when something moved. No wires. No lights. Nothing that would raise suspicion. I sat on the edge of the bed after I finished, staring at the quiet room around me. The same room where we'd spent birthdays, lazy Sundays, long conversations about nothing and everything. And now, I was waiting to see if that space was being shared with someone else while I was away. It felt like betrayal on my part. Like I'd failed her by needing to do this. But I didn't know any other way to breathe again. I needed answers. Real ones. The kind you can't talk yourself out of. By the time she walked through the door that night, cheerful and breezy like nothing had changed, I'd already made peace with whatever I was about to find. I just didn't realize how much it would break me. It happened on a Friday. I had wrapped up work early, but I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car, parked a few blocks from the house, just watching the clock. My heart was pounding for no reason I could explain at the time, like my body already knew something my mind hadn't caught up with. I told Laura earlier that morning I'd be working late, maybe even staying overnight at the downtown office to help with the deployment. She kissed me goodbye, told me to take care of myself, said, "Text me if you get bored." I said I would. I didn't. When I finally drove home around 9 that night, the house was dark and quiet. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I walked in, took off my shoes, and went straight to the spare bedroom where I'd been keeping the small hard drive that stored footage from the cameras. My hands were shaking a little as I plugged it into my laptop, not really knowing what I expected to find. Maybe I'd see nothing. Maybe I'd see her alone, eating dinner, watching TV, proof that I really had imagined all of it. That's what I was hoping for, even as a part of me braced for the alternative. It didn't take long. Around 6:17 p.m., the hallway camera picked up motion. I watched Laura walk into the frame, wearing a blouse I hadn't seen before, phone in hand, hair tied up loosely the way she did when she wanted to look effortless but put together. She walked down the hall toward the bedroom, out of view. 30 seconds later, another figure appeared. It was my brother, Nate. He walked in like he owned the place. No hesitation. He glanced around once, and then followed her into our bedroom. I stared at the screen, breath caught somewhere in my throat, watching as the door closed behind them. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 20. I was frozen. Numb. I don't remember clicking play on the next clip, but I must have, because the bedroom camera activated again at 6:21. And there they were. They didn't talk much. No nervous laughter, no tension, no hesitation. They kissed like people who had done it before. She reached for him without flinching, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I watched the two of them, my wife and my own brother, on the bed we'd shared for almost a decade. Sheets I'd washed the week before. Pillows I'd fluffed that morning. I paused the video, stood up, paced, sat back down, pressed play again. Part of me kept watching, not because I wanted to, but because I needed the reality to settle in. I needed to see enough that there'd be no room for doubt. I didn't want to wonder, didn't want to spend the rest of my life questioning if I had misunderstood. I watched just long enough to burn it into my memory. Then I closed the laptop. I didn't cry. Not then. I felt hollow, like my entire body had gone cold. I sat there, staring at the floor for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of how the two people I trusted most could look so comfortable together behind my back. There wasn't even guilt on their faces. Not a trace of it. They looked happy. relaxed, like I didn't exist. I don't remember grabbing my keys, or walking out the door, or the drive across town. But within 20 minutes, I was standing on my brother's front step, fists clenched at my sides. I didn't knock. I didn't give him the chance to lie. Not yet. But that part of the story, what happened next, is something else entirely. I don't even remember ringing the doorbell. By the time I got to Nate's place, I was running on adrenaline and instinct. My hands were shaking, my jaw clenched so tightly I could barely speak. I didn't come there to talk. I came to end something. When he opened the door, he had the nerve to look surprised. Like he hadn't just been in my home, in my bedroom, with my wife. Like he hadn't just obliterated everything we'd built with one quiet betrayal. He said my name casual, confused, maybe a little nervous. I didn't say a word. I walked past him into his apartment. Where is she? I asked. He froze. What are you talking about? I turned, looked him dead in the eyes. Where is she? He stammered something about not knowing, but I could see it in his face. He wasn't expecting this so soon. Maybe he thought they had more time. Maybe he thought they'd never get caught at all. I didn't give him a chance to speak again. I told him I saw everything. The cameras. The footage. Every second of it. And then, for the first time in my life, I told my brother to get the hell out of my life. He tried to explain, some pathetic combination of excuses and apologies, but I wasn't listening. There was nothing he could say that would undo what he did. I told him he was fired. I had hired him years ago to help with the logistics arm of my company, gave him a salary, benefits, a chance to build something. And now, that was done. Effective immediately. He tried to protest, said he needed the money. I told him he should have thought of that before he decided to sleep with his brother's wife. I walked out and drove straight home. When I got there, she was on the couch in pajamas, scrolling through her phone like it was any other night. The same woman I had just watched betray me in the most personal, soul-shattering way. She looked up, startled when I came in. I didn't say a word at first. I just walked into our bedroom and started grabbing her things, clothes, shoes, drawers full of carefully folded sweaters, makeup bags. I carried them armful by armful to the window and threw them out. She followed me, shouting, "What are you doing? What's wrong with you?" I turned to her, voice shaking but steady enough. "I know. I saw the video. You and Nate." Her face drained of all color. For a second, she just stood there, lips parted like she couldn't decide which lie to go with. Then the defenses kicked in. "It's not what you think." "Don't," I said. "I watched it. I heard you." There's nothing left to explain. She tried to stop me, grabbing my arm, crying now. "Please, let's talk, let me explain. It was a mistake, it didn't mean." I shook her off. "Don't insult me. You don't trip and fall into your husband's brother." Then I pointed at the door. "Get out." She screamed, begged, cursed. Told me I was being dramatic. That I couldn't do this. That we needed to talk. I didn't answer. I kept working. Bag after bag, box after box, out the window onto the lawn. Then I changed the locks. Right there while she watched from the porch, barefoot, sobbing, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I told her not to come back. Told her if she needed anything, she could call a lawyer. And then I shut the door in her face. It wasn't until half an hour later that my phone rang. Her name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, and before I could say anything, her voice came through, calm now, venomous. "You know what? Fine. I don't need this. I don't need you. I'll live with Nate. At least he understands me." Then she hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone. Not shocked. Not even angry anymore. Just done. That was the moment it all clicked into place. She was gone. And whatever version of her I loved was never coming back. My marriage was over. My brother was dead to me. And somehow, even through the wreckage, I felt the smallest flicker of relief. I stood up, went back to the window, and looked at the pile of her things scattered across the lawn. Then I turned off the lights, walked to the spare bedroom, and collapsed onto the bed. Tomorrow, I'd start over. In the days after it all blew apart, I found myself existing in a kind of surreal quiet. The house felt unfamiliar. Every room, every corner, felt touched by what had happened, like the walls themselves had witnessed something too shameful to forget. I couldn't bring myself to go into the bedroom. That space had become a crime scene in my mind. I stayed in the guest room, lying on the smaller bed, surrounded by plain white walls and a closet with nothing in it, as if I were camping in someone else's home. And maybe in a way, I was. The home Laura and I built no longer felt like mine. It felt haunted. I didn't cry much. Maybe once, A couple of days in, when I found an old photo of us tucked in the back of a drawer, one I didn't even remember taking. We were laughing, wrapped in scarves, somewhere upstate in the snow. I must have stared at that picture for an hour. Not because I missed her. Not even because I wanted her back. But because the memory felt like it belonged to someone else. A different man. A man who still believed in the life he was building. That version of me seemed impossibly distant. I blocked Laura's number after that last call. Nate too. There was nothing left to say. My parents were devastated when I told them. My mother cried quietly, and my father sat in stunned silence, muttering that he didn't understand. Your brother, he kept saying, shaking his head. Of all people, but they didn't press me to fix it. There was no fixing this. The fracture ran too deep, too precise. Like something had been severed clean, and the only thing to do was accept it. The first thing I did, once the fog began to lift, was quit my lease on the house. I couldn't stay. I didn't want to repaint walls she'd chosen, sleep under a ceiling where I'd seen too much, eat in a kitchen that once felt warm but now made my stomach turn. I put it on the market within the week and moved into a temporary apartment across town. Nothing fancy, a one-bedroom on the third floor of an old brick building, but it was clean, quiet, and best of all, it held no memories. At first, the loneliness was sharp. The silence was no longer peaceful, it echoed. I'd come home from work, unlock the door, and be met with nothing but the low hum of the fridge and my own thoughts. But over time, the silence became something else. It became space. Breathing room. I filled it slowly, with books I never had time to read, music I hadn't listened to in years, simple meals that didn't need to be shared to be satisfying. I started going for walks in the evenings, sometimes for miles, letting the city swallow me whole, letting the cold air clear out the residue of what I'd been through. And then, unexpectedly, I met someone. Her name was Elise. We crossed paths at a coffee shop I'd started frequenting. She was a regular too, always sitting by the window with a novel in one hand and a tea in the other. It started with a smile, then a few words about the book she was reading, and then one day, I asked if she wanted to sit together. She did. We talked for 2 hours. Not about anything serious, just life, stories, music, food. Nothing heavy, nothing broken. Just two strangers rediscovering the joy of being heard. There was something about her presence that felt different. Steady. Honest. No games, no performance. She didn't ask about my past right away, and I didn't volunteer it. We talked about the present instead, what we were doing now, what we liked, what made us laugh. It was easy. And after everything I'd been through, I didn't know how much I needed easy until I felt it again. I wasn't falling in love, not yet. I was still healing. But Elise reminded me that the world wasn't over. That trust wasn't a myth. That people still looked each other in the eye and meant what they said. We started seeing each other more often. Coffee turned into dinner, then walks, then weekend plans. It was slow, unforced. I wasn't trying to replace what I had lost. I was learning how to want something new. And maybe that was the real shift. Because somewhere in those quiet mornings and long conversations, I stopped being the man who'd been betrayed. I stopped being the husband, the victim, the angry brother. I started being just me. A man building something again, brick by brick, even if it looked nothing like the life he once imagined. It's strange how quickly life moves on, even when yours feels like it's come to a full stop. I remember thinking, in the thick of it all, that the pain would never dull, that the betrayal would become a permanent part of me, a scar so raw I'd feel it every time I got out of bed. But here I am, months later, waking up in a new place, with a new rhythm, and I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hollow either. I'm just here. Alive. A little older in ways that have nothing to do with age, and maybe, just maybe, a little wiser. I kept expecting closure to come like a wave, some dramatic moment where everything would suddenly make sense, and I'd feel healed. But that moment never came. What had come, instead, was something smaller. Simpler. One morning, I was making coffee in my new apartment, and I looked out the window and realized I hadn't thought about Laura or Nate at all the day before. Not even once. And in that silence, in that absence, I realized that I had let go. Not with a dramatic speech or some final confrontation, but in the slow, steady way that people do when they finally stop bleeding. I haven't spoken to either of them since. Laura did try to contact me once more, through email, about a month after everything ended. She apologized again, said she regretted everything, told me Nate was struggling and things between them weren't what she thought they'd be. But I didn't respond. Not out of spite. There was nothing left to say. Whatever they had, whatever it meant, it came at the cost of everything. And I wasn't going to be the one to carry their guilt any longer. That burden wasn't mine. My relationship with Elise has grown, slowly but steadily. We still take things one day at a time. She knows about my past now. She listened when I was ready to talk, asked thoughtful questions, didn't push. She never looked at me like I was damaged or fragile. She saw a man who had been through something awful and made his way out. And I think that's what I needed more than anything, someone who saw me as whole, even when I wasn't sure I still was. I've learned a lot through all of this. About people, about love, about what it means to really know someone. But more than anything, I've learned about myself. I learned that I can survive heartbreak. I learned that I can let go of people I once would have died for. I learned that betrayal doesn't have to define you, and that forgiveness, real forgiveness, doesn't always mean welcoming someone back into your life. Sometimes it just means you stop letting them live rent-free in your head. There's peace in that. So, that's my story. Or at least, the part of it that needed to be told. I'm not sure what the future holds. I don't know if Elise will be the woman I grow old with, or if our paths will someday part. But I do know this. I'm not afraid of rebuilding anymore. I'm not afraid of starting over. Because I've already lived through the worst of it, and I came out the other side not just breathing, but choosing to live again. And that, for me, is enough.